the Indian diaspora and its the role in the Indian development, in the India development story. I've been part of this community for around 8 years. I was born and brought up in India, and I went to Oxford in 2008 to do my master's. So this topic is very personal, is of personal relevance to me, and naturally all the views I present are my personal views as well. So I went to Oxford, started my career in investment banking right after, and I worked in London for around 7 years. But for most of the time, I had this inclination of contributing back to the country in some way or the other. Maybe a part of this was because I had seen Swadesh around 30 times. But I think the bigger part of it was that India was the largest growing large economy in the world, and it still is, and I wanted to be a part of it. So what I did, I went on to events, I started meeting people in the government, in business, to find ways to contribute or be and do India-focused projects. But I found myself in a situation very soon where I learned later that a lot of overseas Indians find themselves in. They want to contribute, but find little or no opportunity to contribute back to the country. So, and so much so that a government report in 2000 realized this gap and said that genuine intentions to contribute back to the country are stalled because of unresponsive policy. So I have come back, some like me have come back, but there are many more who want to contribute and who have high skills, who are not able to uproot their lives, or not able to leave family, or have loans, or various other reasons, and are not able to contribute to the development of India. So that compelled me to look into this topic a bit more. So let us start with the basics. What is the meaning of diaspora? So diaspora is derived from a Greek letter or Greek word which is called diaspiro, which means I scatter. So it has been thought that the word diaspora was used to refer to Jews in the 8th and the 6th century BC as they moved out of Israel. But now it is used mainly to refer to communities of people who move out of their country of origin. A UN migration report in 2017 estimated that there are 258 international migrants around the world. 64% of them live in high-income countries, mostly Asia and Europe. Now let us look at the Indian diaspora in detail. So the Indian diaspora consists of persons of Indian origin. These are around 17.9 million people, and NRIs. And NRIs are basically people who still have Indian passports but have moved out or working out outside the country or living outside the country. Those are around 13 million people. So the total size of the Indian diaspora is around 31 million people. So let me put this into perspective. It's a huge population. If it was a country, it would be the 45th biggest country in the world out of a total of 200 countries. If it was a state in India, it would be the 15th largest state. Its population size is bigger than UAE, Singapore, and its population is bigger than all the Nordic countries combined. And it's not just the size of population, it's the diversity of population as well. The Indian diaspora, the top countries where the Indian diaspora lives, as you might all expect, are US, UK, Myanmar, Saudi Arabia, etc., etc. But in around 30 countries around the world, there are more than 1 lakh people of Indian origins live there. So it's not just a large population, it's also a population which is diversely spread. So let me come to the point of this presentation. How does this big and diverse population impact the development or the India's development story? So I feel there are 5 areas where this community contributes. The first being remittances, second being FDI investment, third being trade, then knowledge and skills transfer, and then global networks. Let me talk about remittances first. That's one of the strong areas for our diaspora as well. I was looking at a talk, watching a talk, by an economist, eminent economist, Mr. Dilip Ratha, and he refers to remittances as dollars wrapped with love, which I think is quite apt because remittances go towards contributing to household finances. Remittances can also be very significant for certain economies. For example, economies like Nepal, Haiti, and Kyrgyz Republic, they contribute to around 30% of the GDP. A UN report estimated that around 413 billion worth of remittances were sent to emerging economies or developing economies in 2016. Out of that, 62.4 billion came to India. This makes us the largest receiver of remittances around the globe. But let me put that into further perspective. In 2016, the amount of FDI, or foreign direct investment, is everyone aware of what foreign direct investment is? The foreign direct investment is basically an investment which is made by a company into an Indian company or to set up a new project, etc. So the total foreign direct investment was 60 billion, so compared to remittances, which was 62. And this is not just a one-year phenomenon. It is from, if you look at the time period from 2000 to 2017, the total foreign direct investment was 499 billion, whereas the total remittances are estimated to be around 791 billion. So that gives you an idea of what the total economic impact that this community has. Let's also look at the FDI, since we're talking about the FDI as well. Let's talk about the impact of the diaspora on the FDI as well. So diaspora are motivated to invest in high-risk areas they're familiar with, i.e. the developing economies which they majorly come from. This is very important for overseas international investors who want to gain the confidence before they enter these new markets. So diaspora play a key role. Let me illustrate by giving you a few examples from around the world. So an Economist article in 2011 focusing on the diaspora had pointed towards a case study, a Harvard Business School case study, which found that American companies employing Chinese people found it much easier to set up local projects in China without a local joint venture partner. And then, as it turns out, Chinese diaspora have been reported to be responsible for around 70% of the FDI coming into China. The same figure I'm reading in various reports is around 9 or 10% for India. So this is an area where we can improve as well. And we'll go through how we can improve that as well. Another report I read by the Monetary Policy Institute, which is a Washington, D.C. based think tank, was from Senegal. So Senegal set up a fund for the Senegalese diaspora, which raised around $40 million that invested in around 800 high-impact projects around the country. Now let us go to trade. So trade, when the diaspora consumes goods and services from their country of origin, they in turn promote them in the country that they live in. And let's talk about the Indian context here. So we can come up with 2 or 3 very concrete examples, which hopefully you can all relate to. Box office sales of Bollywood movies are highly dependent on the presence of diaspora in those countries. The Indian cuisine, Indian food, has been promoted by the diaspora around the world. If you look at foreign tourists' arrivals into India, they're mostly from the countries where we have large populations of the diaspora. Coming to skills and knowledge transfer, our IT industry, our startup ecosystem has benefited a lot from the conversations that they have with the Indian diaspora in Silicon Valley. Our medical industry has benefited from doctors coming in and setting up specialty hospitals with state-of-the-art medical facilities upon their return. A good example that has come up from around the world is Chile Global, from Chile, which is a network of around 1,000 Chileans abroad, which contribute to their country in some shape or form. Now, looking at the last but one of the most important contributions of the diaspora, it is the global networks. So industry chambers, government associations are examples of institutions which are led by the diaspora, and they foster strong relationships of the country of origin with the countries around the world. So we have discussed a few benefits of engaging with this community very, very briefly. So, but it's still surprising that not many countries have invested in really understanding the diaspora around the world. What is the situation in India, as you might be curious to ask? Let me go through the important milestones of the last 2 decades. I cannot go through every engagement that has happened, but I'll cover the key points that have happened in the last 2 decades. Starting with 1998, the Indian government issued Resurgent India bonds. 1998, some of you might have read, that was a time when India was facing sanctions because we did the nuclear tests. We depended on the diaspora's financial power to regain confidence of overseas investors, and to shore up our foreign exchange reserves. So the Resurgent Indian bonds ended up raising $4 billion from diaspora around the world, which was significant at that time. 1999, we launched the PIO scheme. In 2000, the Ministry of External Affairs set up the high-level committee to give recommendations on issues related to the diaspora, some of which have been implemented already. One of the recommendations that have been implemented was in 2003, which is the Pravasi Bharatiya Divas. The Pravasi Bharatiya Divas is held on 9th of January every year since 2003. And do you know what is the significance of 9th of January? So, I didn't know much before as well. So 9th of January was the day when Mahatma Gandhi came back from South Africa. So it is a very, so that is a very significant date, and it's held every year since 2003. In 2005, we launched the OCI scheme, which is Overseas Citizen of India. In 2011, the foundation stone for Pravasi Bharatiya Kendra was laid by the then Prime Minister. And for Pravasi Bharatiya Kendra, for some of the people you don't know, is a building in Chanakyapuri in Delhi, which is the focal point of networking between the Indian diaspora and the Indian community. And it is very encouraging also to see in the last few years that the government is engaging more and more with the diaspora. In 2015, I was part of the euphoric reception that our Prime Minister received in the Wembley Stadium in London. On 9th January, Pravasi Bharatiya Divas, this year, around 3 weeks ago, the Prime Minister attended the first ever PIO parliamentary conference where parliamentarians of Indian origin from around the world were called. And he addressed the diaspora as permanent ambassadors for India and urged them to take part in India's development. Looks like we are in the right direction, but there's a lot that needs to be done. So my last section of the presentation will focus on what measures we can take in the future to recognize this. The world is becoming a very small place because of the technology advancements, where the transport is becoming faster, transport is becoming cheaper, and so the diaspora in the future will have more opportunities to engage with the countries of their origin. The Indian diaspora is larger and much more diverse than ever before, and we must recognize that. So the measures we take should recognize these changes that are happening, and I feel, in my personal opinion, that there are 3 different perspectives that we can take. The first one is here, that why don't we look at or perceive the diaspora as the 30th state? To do that, in addition to an immigration policy, we could also have an emigration strategy to engage the diaspora in the future. The foreign missions abroad, as we call them, foreign Indian embassies abroad, the foreign missions abroad could be key in cultivating a sense of community within the diaspora by having events like marathons, meetups, etc., etc. Online voting for NRIs could be considered. The reintegration process for people of Indian origin could be streamlined as well. And I think the last and the most important measure in this perspective would be to engage highly skilled people in the Indian education system. And we could start by focusing on the retired personnel within the diaspora. The second perspective we can take is the diaspora's role in promoting India as a global investment destination. So if you remember, I spoke about a committee that was set up in 2000 by the Ministry of External Affairs. So a lot of recommendations that came out of that were focused on a single window clearance system for various activities of the diaspora. I think the primary activity that can benefit from this would be investments from the Indian diaspora. And I think cross-border trade or procedures related to cross-border trade should be further streamlined as well. India, we could issue diaspora bonds on a regular basis. And we can take its inspiration from Israel, where Israel issues bonds on a regular basis for their diaspora. There's an India Development Foundation for Overseas Indians, which facilitates philanthropic efforts of overseas Indians. This should be marketed even further, and I think more aggressively, because not many people know about it. And the last one is that is to incentivize the diaspora to be an ambassador for India. I think one of the key measures that could help with this are distance learning programs, and with the technology in education system that we have today, these could be facilitated by eminent universities, and they would quantify the knowledge and the skills some people have for regards to the Indian economy or the Indian culture, which could be beneficial in their business or personal lives. We could also consider inviting NRI delegations to India more often, so that they can see the opportunities that exist here. And one of the inspirations that we can take is again from Israel, which is the Bright Right program, which calls young members of the Israeli diaspora to their country on a regular basis. And I think lastly, Indian diaspora should be one of the main partners in promoting Indian brands and Indian companies abroad. So in conclusion, we've gone through some of the positive impact that the diaspora has in the development of India. And I think if India is to become a global economy of the 21st century, we need to leverage this asset, that unique asset that we have, to the fullest. Thank you very much.